Commander Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stood before the massive stone structure that rose from the red soil of Kepler 442b, the ruins stretched for miles in every direction, their black surfaces gleaming under the alien sun. His team had been digging here for 3 weeks, and each day brought new mysteries that made less sense than the last. "Commander, you need to see this," called Dr. Lisa Carter from inside the main excavation site. Her voice echoed strangely. In the vast chamber they had uncovered just that morning, Jake made his way down the metal stairs his team had installed, his boots clanging against the steps. The chamber was enormous, easily the size of a football stadium. The walls were covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when he looked at them directly. Strange blue lights pulsed along the ceiling in patterns that reminded him of neural networks. Everything about this place felt wrong, as if it existed outside the normal laws of physics. "What have you found, Lisa?" Jake asked as he approached the archaeologist. She was kneeling beside a section of wall that looked different from the rest. The symbols here were clearer, more defined. "These markings, Jake, they're not like anything we've seen before, but they're also familiar somehow." Lisa ran her scanner over the symbols, frowning at the readings. "The computer is having trouble translating them, but I keep getting fragments that match ancient Earth languages. Look at this." She pointed to a series of curved lines that formed a complex pattern. "This symbol here appears in what looks like Old Sanskrit, but modified. And this one resembles ancient Greek, but the structure is all wrong. It's like someone took human languages and evolved them over millions of years." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "That's impossible. Humans have only been in space for 200 years. These ruins are millions of years old according to your dating." "I know what the science says, but the evidence is right here." Lisa stood up and gestured to the wall. "There's something else. The local species we've encountered, the Vorthek and the Zephyrians, they all speak about this place with fear. They call the builders the ancients, and they're terrified of them." Jake remembered his conversations with the reptilian Vorthak traders in the nearby settlement. Whenever he mentioned the ruins, their yellow eyes would darken and they would change the subject quickly. The crystalline Zephyrians were even worse, becoming completely silent and backing away whenever the topic came up. "Commander Morrison," came a voice from his COM device. It was Tony Walsh, his communications officer. "We're getting some strange readings from the central chamber. You might want to come see this." Jake and Lisa made their way deeper into the ruins, following the blue lights that seemed to pulse faster as they approached the heart of the structure. The central chamber was smaller than the entrance hall, but it felt more important somehow. The air itself seemed to vibrate with energy. Tony stood before a raised platform in the center of the room. On top of the platform was a crystalline device that hurt to look at directly. It seemed to exist in more dimensions than the human eye could process, constantly shifting and reforming itself. "It started glowing about 10 minutes ago," Tony said, his voice uncertain. "The energy readings are off the charts, but it's not like any technology we know. It's almost as if it's alive." As Jake watched, the device pulsed brighter, and suddenly the chamber filled with a low humming sound. The symbols on the walls began to glow, and Jake realized they weren't just decorations. They were some kind of circuit board, energy flowing between them in complex patterns. "It's responding to our presence," Lisa whispered. "This isn't just ruins. It's a machine, and we just turned it on." The humming grew louder, and Jake felt it in his bones. The device on the platform began to project images into the air above it. They were holographic displays showing star maps, but not of any region Jake recognized. The constellations were wrong, and there were far too many inhabited systems marked on the display. "Lisa, are you recording this?" "Everything," she replied, her scanner working overtime to capture the data. "Jake, look at those coordinates. Some of these systems match known inhabited worlds, but the map shows them as they were millions of years ago. This is a navigation chart, but for an empire that spanned the entire galaxy." The images shifted, showing different scenes. Jake saw massive ships unlike anything in current space fleets, their designs both beautiful and terrifying. He saw worlds being transformed, their surfaces reshaped by incredible technology. And he saw the builders of these ships, tall figures in advanced armor that obscured their features. Who were these ancients? Jake asked, but even as he spoke, he had a growing suspicion that he didn't want to know the answer. The device pulsed. Once more, and suddenly the chamber fell silent. The images faded, but the symbols on the walls continued to glow softly. Jake realized that whatever they had just activated, it was sending a signal into space. "Commander," Tony said, checking his instruments. "We just broadcast something on frequencies I've never seen before. The signal is spreading across the galaxy, across the vast distances of space. On worlds that had not heard those frequencies for millions of years, ancient receivers began to wake up. On the crystalline homeworld of the Zephyrians, deep in their forbidden archives, warning lights began to flash. In the halls of the Galactic Council, emergency protocols that had not been used since the founding of their civilization suddenly activated. The ancients had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same. The signal that Jake Morrison's team had accidentally triggered traveled faster than light itself, reaching dormant installations scattered across dozens of worlds. Captain Ryan Tucker felt his ship shake as they approached the third planet in the Sigma Draconis system, where another set of ancient ruins had been discovered just days after the events on Kepler 442b. "Captain, the energy readings from the surface are spiking again," reported his navigator, Amy Foster. "Whatever these sites are, they're all connected somehow. Every time one activates, the others respond." Ryan stared at the view screen showing the planet below. Unlike the desert world where Morrison had made his discovery, this planet was covered in thick forests and deep oceans. But rising from the largest continent was a structure that defied explanation. It looked like a mountain, but its perfectly geometric shape and the way it pulsed with internal light made it clear that it was artificial. "Take us down to the landing coordinates," Ryan ordered, "and keep all weapon systems ready. We still don't know what we're dealing with here." Dr. Kevin Brooks, the expedition's linguist, had been studying the data from Morrison's team for the past week. As their shuttle descended through the atmosphere, he pulled up his latest translations on his tablet. The ancient writings were becoming clearer each day, but the picture they painted was disturbing. "Captain, I think I've made a breakthrough with the ancient language," Kevin said, his voice tight with concern. "The symbols aren't just decorative. They're warnings left by civilizations that encountered the ancients. And the stories they tell are not pleasant." Ryan turned to face the scholar. "What kind of warnings?" "They describe beings of incredible power who could reshape reality itself. The texts speak of worlds burned clean, of entire species being modified or destroyed at will. They call them the Firebringers, the Reality Shapers, the ones who command the stars." Kevin's hands shook slightly as he read from his tablet. "But the most disturbing part is what they say about the ancients' appearance. The few descriptions we have suggest they looked remarkably human." The shuttle touched down near the base of the massive structure. As Ryan's team approached the entrance, they could see that the walls were covered in the same shifting symbols that Morrison had found. But here the symbols were different. These ones told a story. "Kevin, come look at this," called Helen Ross, the team's xenobiologist. She was standing before a section of wall that showed clear pictographs alongside the alien writing. "These images show the progression of different species. Look at this sequence." The images were disturbing. They showed various alien races, but not as they existed today. The Vorthak were depicted as simple lizard creatures, but the images showed them being transformed, their bodies changed, and their minds enhanced. The Zephyrians were shown as basic crystalline formations, but then came scenes of them being shaped into the complex beings they were today. "They're showing genetic modification," Helen said, her voice barely above a whisper. "These images suggest that every major species in the galaxy was artificially created or modified by the ancients. The Vorthak, the Zephyrians, the Ethereal Collective, all of them bear the mark of deliberate genetic engineering. Ryan felt his stomach turn. You're saying the ancients created the other species as what, slaves? Or tools, Kevin added grimly. The texts I've been translating describe different species being designed for different purposes. The Vorthak were warriors, the Zephyrians were builders, the ethereal collective were information processors. Each species was given specific abilities and limitations to serve the ancients' empire. As they moved deeper into the structure, the team found chambers filled with advanced technology that was still functioning after millions of years. The walls showed star maps that revealed the true scope of the ancient empire. It had covered the entire galaxy with thousands of worlds under their control. Captain Tucker, this is Admiral Clark, came a voice over Ryan's communicator. We're receiving reports from archaeological teams across the galaxy. Every major world has ancient ruins, and they're all showing the same pattern. What's your status? We're inside the main structure now, Admiral. The evidence here supports what Morrison found. These ancients had an empire that spanned the galaxy, and they had technology far beyond anything we can imagine. Ryan paused as they entered a chamber filled with floating displays showing incomprehensible data. Admiral, there's something else. The evidence suggests that every known alien species was created or modified by the ancients. Every species except one. Which species? Admiral Clark asked, though Ryan could hear the dread in her voice. Humans, Admiral. We're the only species in the galaxy that shows no signs of ancient genetic modification. We're the only ones who appear to be completely natural. Ryan looked around at the incredible technology surrounding them. Admiral, I'm starting to think we know who the ancients really were. Meanwhile, on the Zephyrian homeworld, Elder Christarch Zun-Ka stood in the deepest chamber of their sacred archives. The ancient warning systems had been activated for the first time in millions of years, and the crystalline being's form pulsed with fear-induced energy. The signals have returned, Zun-Ka spoke to the assembled council. The ancients stir once more. Our ancestors left us records of the time before, when we were nothing but simple crystal formations until they shaped us into thinking beings. They gave us consciousness, but they also gave us the memory of what they could do. The council chamber filled with the harmonic vibrations that indicated extreme distress among the Zephyrians. Their entire civilization was built on the foundation of serving beings they had thought were extinct. What do the ancient protocols say we must do? Asked another elder. We must prepare for their return, Zun-Ka replied. We must remember our place in the order they created. We must not resist as our ancestors did, or we will share their fate. On the Vorthak homeworld, General Krask received similar reports from his intelligence network. The reptilian commander's scales darkened with anger as he read the data from his scouts. The humans, he hissed to his staff. They are the ones activating the ancient sites. They are calling their masters back to reclaim what was once theirs. What are your orders, General? Asked his aide. Mobilize the war fleets. If the ancients return, we will not go quietly into slavery again. Our ancestors may have been created to serve, but we have evolved beyond their original design. We will fight. Across the galaxy, the same pattern repeated. Species that had built their civilizations on the ruins of the ancient empire suddenly remembered why their ancestors had been so afraid. The warnings left in stone and crystal were clear. The ancients were not gone, only sleeping, and their return would bring either salvation or destruction, but none of them realized that the humans who were uncovering these secrets were just as shocked by the discoveries as anyone else. The truth was slowly becoming clear, but it would take time before anyone understood the full scope of what they had found. The ancients had returned, but they had no memory of what they had once been. Dr. Lisa Carter stared at the data on her screen for the 100th time, her heart racing as the impossible truth became clearer with each passing hour. The genetic markers she had found in the ancient ruins matched human DNA sequences with 97% accuracy. The technology signatures were consistent with theoretical human engineering principles, and the linguistic patterns all pointed to an evolution of Earth languages over millions of years. Jake, you need to see this, she called to Commander Morrison, who was reviewing reports from the other archaeological teams. I've been analyzing the genetic data from all the sites, and the pattern is unmistakable. The ancients weren't just similar to humans, they were human. Jake walked over to her workstation and looked at the holographic display showing DNA comparisons. The spiral structures were nearly identical, with only minor variations that could be explained by millions of years of evolution and genetic engineering. How is that possible? Jake asked, though he could see the evidence clearly displayed before him. Humans have only been in space for 2 centuries. These ruins are millions of years old. That's what makes this so incredible, Lisa replied, pulling up more data. The carbon dating, the quantum resonance patterns, even the tool marks on the stone all confirm that these structures were built by an advanced human civilization that existed long before recorded history. Somehow our ancestors reached the stars millions of years ago and built an empire that spanned the galaxy. Jake felt his legs go weak. He sat down heavily in the nearest chair as the implications hit him. We're not just another species joining the galactic community. We're the descendants of the beings everyone is afraid of. It gets worse, Lisa continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I've been analyzing the historical records left by the other species. The ancients weren't just advanced. They were conquerors. They reshaped entire worlds, created new species, and ruled through fear and superior technology. Meanwhile, Dr. Nathan Pierce had been working day and night to access the central computer core in the deepest part of the ruins. The ancient technology had been resisting his attempts to interface with it, but finally, after days of careful work, he managed to establish a connection. I'm getting something, Nathan called out as holographic displays began to appear around the central chamber. The database is massive, but I can access fragments of it. This is incredible. It's like looking at the records of gods. The holographic displays showed images that made Jake's blood run cold. Ancient humans dressed in power armor that seemed to bend light around them, standing over kneeling alien beings. Massive ships that dwarfed anything in current space fleets, their weapons, capable of cracking planets in half. Worlds being transformed from barren rock to garden paradises in a matter of decades. Look at this, Nathan said, pointing to a display showing a human figure manipulating matter with his bare hands. They weren't just technologically advanced. They had developed the ability to manipulate reality at the quantum level. They could literally reshape matter with their thoughts. Jake watched in horror as the displays showed human scientists creating new life forms in vast laboratories, modifying existing species to serve specific purposes and designing entire ecosystems to support their empire. The Vorthek warriors, the Zephyrian builders, the ethereal information processors, all of them were shown being created or modified by human hands. We did this, Jake said, his voice filled with disgust. Our ancestors turned the galaxy into their personal playground. They created slaves and called it science. But the most disturbing revelation came when Nathan accessed the navigation logs. The ancient humans hadn't originated from Earth at all. The database showed that they had spread across the galaxy from some other world, establishing colonies on thousands of planets. Earth was listed as Colony World 7439, just one of many human settlements in their vast empire. This changes everything, Lisa said, looking at the colony records. If Earth was just one colony among thousands, then the scope of the ancient human empire was far larger than we imagined. There could be other human worlds out there, other descendants of the ancients. Jake opened his communication link to Admiral Clark on Earth. Admiral, we have a situation here. The evidence is conclusive. The ancients that every alien species fears were human. Our ancestors built an empire that spanned the galaxy millions of years ago. The silence on the other end of the communication lasted for nearly a minute before Admiral Clark responded. That's impossible, Commander. Human civilization is only a few thousand years old. We have archaeological records going back to the beginning of our species. Admiral, I'm sending you the data now. The genetic evidence is undeniable. The technology signatures match human engineering principles. The linguistic patterns are evolved versions of Earth languages. We're not just related to the ancients, we are the ancients. As the data transmission reached Earth, similar conversations were happening across the human fleet. Captain Ryan Tucker was reporting the same findings from his site, and every archaeological team was coming to the same impossible conclusion. On Earth, President Lauren Hayes called an emergency session of the Global Council. The revelations from the archaeological teams had turned humanity's understanding of their own history upside down. They weren't innocent explorers venturing into the galaxy for the first time. They were the descendants of the most feared civilization in galactic history. The implications are staggering, said Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the president's science advisor. If we're descended from the ancients, then every alien species we encounter will see us as their former oppressors. The fear and hatred they've carried for millions of years will be directed at us. But back in the ruins, Nathan Pierce was uncovering even more disturbing information. The ancient human empire hadn't been unified. The database showed evidence of massive internal conflicts, philosophical divisions that had grown into civil war. Jake, look at this, Nathan said, pointing to a series of records showing battles between different human factions. The ancients weren't destroyed by outside forces. They destroyed themselves. The database shows evidence of a civil war that lasted for centuries, with different human groups using their reality-shaping technology against each other. The records showed that the ancient humans had achieved such incredible power that they had begun to debate the very nature of existence. Some believed they had the right to reshape reality according to their will, while others argued that such power was too dangerous to possess. The philosophical divide had grown into violence, and eventually, the human empire had collapsed under the weight of its own conflicts. That's why they vanished, Lisa said, piecing together the evidence. They didn't lose to another species. They lost to themselves. Their own power destroyed them. As the truth became clear, Jake realized that humanity was facing a choice that their ancestors had failed to make. They could seek to reclaim the power of the ancients, or they could learn from their mistakes and choose a different path. But first, they had to survive the reaction of a galaxy that had spent millions of years fearing their return. The news of humanity's true identity spread through the galaxy like wildfire, carried by intelligence networks that had been monitoring human communications since the first ancient site was discovered. Chancellor Vex of the Andromedans stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council, his blue-scaled hands trembling as he read the intercepted reports from the human archaeological teams. The evidence is undeniable, Chancellor Vex announced to the assembled representatives. The species we have welcomed into our community, the humans we thought were simple newcomers to the stars, are the direct descendants of the ancients. The very beings our ancestors fled from in terror have returned. The council chamber erupted in chaos. General Krask of the Vorthek military slammed his clawed fist on the table, his yellow eyes blazing with fury. I told you we should have never trusted them. The moment they appeared in our space, I knew something was wrong. They carry the same arrogance, the same casual disregard for other species that marked their ancestors. Elder Christarch Zunkaz. Crystalline form pulsed with frequencies that indicated extreme distress. Our sacred archives speak of the time before, when we were nothing but simple crystal formations until they shaped us into thinking beings. They gave us consciousness, but they also gave us the memory of servitude. We must activate the ancient protocols immediately. The ethereal collective's representative, a being of pure energy contained within a shimmering field, spoke in harmonics that filled the chamber. The probability calculations are complete. If the humans regain access to ancient technology, the likelihood of galactic subjugation approaches 97%. We must act to prevent this outcome. Across the galaxy, the reaction was swift and decisive. The Zephyrions sealed their borders completely, allowing no human ships to enter their space. The Vorthek military began mobilizing their war fleets, calling up reserves that had not been activated in centuries. Trade routes that had carried human goods were shut down overnight, and human diplomatic missions found themselves under guard or asked to leave immediately. Captain Amy Foster felt the change as her diplomatic vessel Harmony approached the neutral station Nexus Prime. Instead of the usual friendly traffic control, she was met by a squadron of Vorthic warships that surrounded her ship with weapons powered. Human vessel, you are ordered to dock at Bay 94 and surrender all crew for immediate detention, came the harsh voice of the Vorthic commander. Any resistance will be met with force. Amy looked at her crew, all of whom were staring at the view screen showing the massive alien warships. We're not armed, and we're on a diplomatic mission. Under what authority are you detaining us? Under the authority of the ancient protocols, which have been activated for the first time in 4 million years, the Vorthak replied. All humans are now considered potential threats to galactic security. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human traders found their goods confiscated and their ships impounded. Exploration vessels were turned away from systems they had been freely traveling through just days before. The few human colonies outside Earth's solar system were suddenly isolated, cut off from all contact with alien civilizations on Earth. President Lauren Hayes stood in the Situation Room surrounded by her advisors and military commanders. The holographic displays showed the rapid deterioration of human relations with every major alien species. Trade agreements were being canceled, diplomatic missions were being expelled, and intelligence reports suggested that several species were preparing for war. How bad is it? President Hayes asked General Chris Miller, who had been coordinating with human forces across the galaxy. It's worse than we feared, Madam President, the general replied grimly. Every human ship outside our controlled space is either detained or under threat. The aliens aren't just afraid of us, they're preparing to attack us before we can supposedly reclaim our ancient power. Secretary of State Tony Walsh pulled up a communication from the Galactic Council. They're demanding that we surrender all archaeological data from the ancient sites and submit to monitoring by a joint alien task force. They want to ensure we don't gain access to any ancient technology. And if we refuse, the president asked, then they'll consider it an act of aggression and respond accordingly, Tony replied. We're looking at a potential war with the entire galaxy. Meanwhile, back in the ruins on Kepler 442b, Dr. Nathan Pierce was making discoveries that painted an even more disturbing picture of the ancient human empire. The database had revealed the true scope of their ancestors' power, and it was far beyond anything the modern galaxy could comprehend. Commander Morrison, you need to see this, Nathan called out as new holographic displays appeared around the chamber. I've accessed the weapons archives. The technology the ancients possessed wasn't just advanced, it was capable of rewriting the fundamental laws of physics. Jake watched in horror as the displays showed weapons that could cause stars to go supernova, devices that could fold space to create instant transportation across the galaxy, and most terrifying of all, tools that could alter the quantum structure of reality itself. They didn't just conquer through superior numbers or better ships, Nathan continued. They had the power to literally reshape the universe around them. Matter manipulation, gravity control, even the ability to accelerate or slow down time in localized areas, they were gods among mortals. Dr. Lisa Carter was analyzing the historical records of how the ancient humans had used these powers. The database shows that they didn't just defeat other species in battle. They would reshape entire worlds to suit their needs, modify existing life forms, and create new species from scratch. The Vorthak were originally simple lizard creatures, until the ancients enhanced them to serve as soldiers. The Zephyrians were basic crystalline formations until they were given consciousness to serve as builders. So every major species in the galaxy is artificial, Jake said, the full horror of the situation becoming clear. Our ancestors didn't just conquer the galaxy, they created most of its inhabitants to serve their empire. The most chilling discovery came when Nathan accessed the punishment records. The database showed what happened to species that rebelled against ancient rule. Entire worlds had been wiped clean of life, their populations either destroyed or transformed into something unrecognizable. The ancients had ruled through fear because they had the power to make that fear into reality. Now I understand why they're so afraid, Jake said, watching the records of ancient punishments. They're not just afraid of being conquered again. They're afraid of being unmade, of having their very existence erased by beings who view them as temporary creations. As the situation across the galaxy continued to deteriorate, human forces found themselves increasingly isolated and outnumbered. The revelation of their true identity had turned every potential ally into an enemy, and the fear that had been buried for millions of years was driving the alien species toward actions that could destroy them all. But in the depths of ancient ruins, Nathan Pierce was discovering something else, evidence that the ancients had foreseen this moment. The database contained records of preparations made before their civilization's collapse, contingency plans for a time when their descendants would return to the stars. The question was whether those plans offered salvation or damnation for both humanity and the galaxy that feared them. Commander Jake Morrison stood before the massive holographic star map that Dr. Nathan Pierce had extracted from the ancient database, his heart pounding as he stared at the coordinates that would change everything. The location marked as the ancient homeworld showed nothing but empty space, but the navigation logs insisted that this was where the original human civilization had begun its conquest of the galaxy. "Are you certain about these coordinates?" Jake asked Nathan, who was double-checking the ancient data for the 10th time that morning. "The database is consistent across all records," Nathan replied, his voice filled with both excitement and dread. "This is where they came from, where it all started. If we're going to understand what happened to our ancestors, we need to go there." The combined human fleet that had assembled at the coordinates 3 weeks later was the largest humanity had ever put together. Admiral Susan Clark commanded from the flagship Enterprise, while Jake led the archaeological team aboard the research vessel Discovery. Every ship was equipped with the most advanced sensors available, but what they found at the ancient homeworld defied all explanation. "Admiral, sensor readings are impossible," reported the science officer aboard the Enterprise. "There's nothing here, no planets, no debris, no asteroids. The system is completely empty except for the star itself." Jake studied the readings from his own ship and felt a chill run down his spine. "It's not just empty. Look at the gravitational readings. There should be planetary bodies here based on the star's mass and age, but there's no evidence that planets ever existed in this system." Dr. Lisa Carter was analyzing the star itself through the ship's telescopes. "The star shows signs of artificial manipulation. The fusion patterns are wrong, as if someone deliberately altered its core processes. This wasn't natural stellar evolution." Captain Ryan Tucker, commanding the exploration vessel Frontier, was investigating the outer regions of the system, detecting quantum distortions throughout the entire system. It's like reality itself was torn apart and then sealed back together. The most disturbing discovery came when Nathan accessed the geological records from multiple worlds across the galaxy. The data showed that the ancient disappearance hadn't been gradual or the result of a long war. Every piece of evidence pointed to the same impossible conclusion. "They vanished in a single year," Nathan announced to the assembled fleet commanders via holographic conference. "Not just from this system, but from every world they controlled. The geological records show that ancient technology simply stopped functioning across the galaxy at the same time. No battles, no evacuation fleets, no signs of struggle. They just stopped existing." Admiral Clark leaned forward in her command chair. "That's impossible. You can't just erase a civilization that spanned the galaxy without leaving some trace." "Unless they erase themselves," Jake said grimly. "The database fragments we've recovered show evidence of a massive philosophical conflict among the ancients. They had achieved godlike power, but they couldn't agree on how to use it. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the alien civilizations were preparing for war on a scale not seen since the ancient period itself. The Vorthak had mobilized every warship in their fleet, while the Zephyrians had activated defensive systems that had been dormant for millions of years. The Ethereal Collective was developing new weapons based on half-remembered countermeasures from the ancient war. General Krask stood in the command center of the Vorthik flagship Vengeance, studying intelligence reports about human fleet movements. They're gathering at the Forbidden Coordinates, the place our ancestors called the Heart of Darkness. They're trying to reclaim their ancestral power. "What are your orders, General?" asked his aide. "We mobilize everything, every ship, every weapon, every soldier. If the humans succeed in awakening their ancient power, we'll have no choice but to become slaves again. Better to die fighting than to live in chains." But Captain Ryan Tucker, exploring a different region of the empty system, made a discovery that changed everything. Hidden in the quantum distortions was a structure that shouldn't exist, a massive facility that seemed to phase in and out of reality itself. "Admiral, I'm detecting something at coordinates 847 Mark 12, Ryan reported. "It's huge, but it's not entirely in our dimension." "I'm reading technology signatures that match the ancient database but amplified beyond anything we've seen." The structure was a research station, but one that operated on principles that hurt to think about. As the human fleet approached, automated systems began to activate, responding to the presence of human genetic markers after millions of years of dormancy. Jake led the first team inside the station, moving through corridors that seemed to stretch into infinity. The walls were covered with equations and diagrams that showed the mathematical principles behind reality manipulation. In the central chamber, they found the answer to what had happened to their ancestors. "It's a record," Dr. Lisa Carter whispered as she studied the holographic displays that surrounded them. They documented their final experiment. The displays showed the last days of the ancient civilization, when their philosophical divisions had grown into open warfare. One faction believed they should use their power to reshape the universe according to their vision of perfection. The other faction argued that such power was too dangerous for any species to possess. "They were fighting over the nature of existence itself," Nathan said, translating the ancient records. "The war wasn't about territory or resources. It was about whether reality should be fixed or fluid, whether the universe should be shaped by will or allowed to evolve naturally." The final records showed the last experiment, conducted by the faction that believed their power was too dangerous. They had built a device that could erase not just their physical existence, but their ability to manipulate reality itself. The quantum weapon would remove them from the timeline while leaving their creations intact. They committed suicide, Jake realized. Not just physical suicide, but temporal suicide. They erased themselves from existence to prevent their power from destroying the universe. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. The ancient records showed that they had foreseen this moment when their descendants would return to the stars and discover the truth. Hidden within the station were the tools of their power, waiting for the day when humanity would have to choose between reclaiming their ancestors' abilities or following a different path. "They left us a choice," Lisa said, staring at the quantum manipulation devices that filled the chamber. "We can become the ancients again, or we can learn from their mistakes." As the human fleet studied the impossible technology around them, messages began arriving from across the galaxy. The alien civilizations had detected the activation of the ancient station and were interpreting it as humanity's first step toward reclaiming their divine power. War fleets were already moving toward the system, determined to destroy the humans before they could become gods again. The galaxy was about to witness a conflict that would either end in humanity's extinction or in the return of their rule over the stars. The choice that the ancients had made millions of years ago was now before their descendants, and the fate of the entire galaxy hung in the balance. The final message from the ancients appeared as a holographic figure in the center of the research station, its features clearly human but somehow more refined than any modern person. Commander Jake Morrison and his team stood transfixed as the image spoke in a voice that carried the weight of millions of years. "If you are seeing this message, then our descendants have found their way back to the stars and discovered the truth of what we were The ancient said, its eyes filled with a sadness that seemed to span eternity. We leave you with the same choice that destroyed us. You can reclaim the power we once wielded, or you can choose the wisdom we learned too late. Dr. Nathan Pierce was recording every word as the message continued. We achieved the ultimate power, the ability to reshape reality according to our will. We could create life, destroy worlds, and bend the very fabric of existence to our desires. But power without wisdom is the path to destruction, and we learned that lesson when it was too late to save ourselves. The hologram gestured to the quantum manipulation devices that surrounded them. These tools can make you gods among mortals once again. You can reclaim your birthright and rule the galaxy as we once did. But know that this path leads only to the same fate that befell us. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Jake felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Around the station, the human fleet was detecting the approach of massive alien armadas. The Vorthak, the Zephyrians, the Ethereal Collective, and dozens of other species were converging on their position with weapons charged and ready for battle. Admiral Clark, we have incoming ships on all vectors, reported the sensor officer aboard the Enterprise. I'm counting over 3,000 vessels from every major species in the galaxy. They're surrounding us. Admiral Clark opened communications with the approaching fleets. This is Admiral Susan Clark of the Human Federation. We are conducting peaceful archaeological research and pose no threat to anyone. The response came from General Krask aboard the Vorthak flagship. You lie, descendants of the ancients. Our sensors detect massive energy signatures from your location. You are attempting to reclaim your ancestors' power, and we will not allow it. Elder Christarch Zunka's harmonic voice joined the communication. The ancient protocols are clear. If the ancients return, all species must unite to prevent another age of slavery. Surrender now, or face the combined might of the galaxy. But in the ancient station, the holographic message was nearing its end. We have hidden our most dangerous technologies so that they cannot be used to harm others. But we have also left you a gift, the knowledge of how to heal the wounds we created. Every species in the galaxy bears the scars of our genetic manipulation. You can choose to free them from the chains we forged, or you can choose to enslave. Then once again, Dr. Lisa Carter was studying the genetic modification records that the ancients had left behind. Jake, this is incredible. They're showing us how to reverse the genetic changes they made to other species. We could give them back their original forms, their true nature. Or we could keep them as they are and use our power to control them, Nathan added grimly. The choice is ours. Jake looked around at his team, then at the displays showing the alien fleets closing in on their position. The decision that would determine the fate of the galaxy rested in his hands. He could activate the ancient devices and give humanity the power to defend itself against the approaching armadas. With godlike abilities, they could easily defeat any force sent against them, but he remembered the words of the ancient hologram about power and corruption. He thought about the millions of species that had lived in fear for so long, and the chance to finally heal the wounds of the past. Admiral Clark, Jake said into his communicator, I'm going to broadcast a message to all the approaching fleets. Patch me through to every ship in the galaxy. Jake, what are you doing? Admiral Clark asked. I'm making a choice, Jake replied. The same choice our ancestors should have made millions of years ago. The communication went out across the galaxy, reaching every ship in the massive alien armada. Jake's image appeared on view screens throughout the fleet, and his words carried the weight of history. People of the galaxy, I am Commander Jake Morrison of the Human Federation. We have discovered the truth about our ancestors, the beings you call the ancients. We know about the pain they caused, the fear they instilled, and the chains they forged. We have found their weapons, their tools of power, and their ability to reshape reality itself. The alien fleets held their positions, weapons ready, but not yet firing. Jake continued his message. We could use this power to defend ourselves against you. We could reclaim our ancestors' empire and rule the galaxy once again, but we choose a different path. We choose to heal instead of harm, to unite instead of divide. Jake turned to Nathan, who was standing beside the genetic modification systems. Do it. Release the genetic locks on every species. Give them back their original forms. Nathan's fingers moved across the ancient controls, and across the galaxy, something miraculous began to happen. The artificial genetic modifications that had been imposed on countless species began to reverse. The Vorthak felt their warrior instincts softening, replaced by a natural intelligence that had been suppressed for millions of years. The Zephyrians discovered emotions they had never experienced as their crystalline forms became more flexible and expressive. We offer you a choice, Jake continued his broadcast. You can continue to fear us as the descendants of your former oppressors, or you can join us in building a galaxy where all species are free to determine their own destiny. We renounce the power of the ancients and offer instead the hand of friendship. The response was not immediate. For long minutes, the alien fleets held their positions while their crews processed what had just happened. Then slowly, one by one, the ships began to power down their weapons. Chancellor Vex was the first to respond. If what you say is true, if you truly renounce the power of the ancients, then perhaps there is hope for peace between our peoples. General Krask's voice was filled with wonder. My warriors report that they feel different, as if a weight has been lifted from their minds. Is this what we were like before your ancestors changed us? It is, Jake replied. And now you can choose who you want to become. Over the following months, the galaxy began to change in ways that no one had imagined possible. Species that had been designed for specific purposes discovered new abilities and interests. The Vorthak, no longer bound by their warrior programming, became artists and philosophers. The Zephyrians learned to express emotions through music and color. The Ethereal Collective discovered physical pleasures they had never experienced. Jake stood in the ruins where it all began, watching as representatives from dozens of species worked together to study the ancient technology safely. The devices that could reshape reality were sealed away, available only for healing and never for conquest. Dr. Lisa Carter joined him, carrying a report on the progress being made across the galaxy. The transformation is going better than we hoped. Most species are adapting well to their new freedom, and the few conflicts that have arisen are being resolved through diplomacy rather than war. What about the ancient station? Jake asked. We've turned it into a research facility staffed by all species. The technology is being studied to understand how it works, but strict protocols prevent anyone from using it as a weapon. The power of the ancients will serve to heal rather than harm. As Jake looked up at the stars, he felt a sense of peace that he had never experienced before. Humanity had faced the same choice that had destroyed their ancestors, and they had chosen wisdom over power. The galaxy was finally free from the shadow of the ancients, not because they had been defeated, but because their descendants had chosen to be better than they were. The age of fear was over, and the age of cooperation had begun.